Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Hello, welcome to the Shure Sounding Board. I'm Peter James, Shure's Vice President of Global Sales for Pro Audio, and I'm delighted to be leading today's panel discussion, looking back briefly at the impact of these last months on the live performance industry, but more importantly, getting insight and opinions of our panelists on what the future might hold as the industry emerges from lockdown. Our panelists today span the whole journey of music production and performance, from the original artist and professional musician right through studio, record company, management, promotion, audio engineering and production, and finally the performance venue, where just 10 months ago we'd have been delighted to be in to enjoy that unique experience of live performance with friends and even make new friends in the process. Before I introduce our guests, just a couple of housekeeping points. We are streaming live, and you can place comments and questions for our panelists, which, time permitting, we'll do our very best to answer. To help me with that, I'm joined by Rick Renner, Shure's Director of Sales for the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, who'll be assisting with Q&A and throwing in a few questions of his own, I'm sure. So without further delay, let me introduce our awesome panelists. Firstly, here we go. So, Julie Weir, starting out humbly in a Leeds record store over 25 years ago, Julie has established very strong networks at all levels and in all sectors of the music industry. Whether running nightclubs like Subverse or starting and managing labels like Cacophonous, Visible Noise, Wise Blood, her focus has always been on developing new and up-and-coming UK artists, both musically and from a business management perspective. She currently serves as the label head for Sony Music UK, and the venerable Music for Nations has been an AIM board member and was in Music Week's Women in Music Roll of Honour inauguration class. We're very much looking forward to hearing from Julie about the effects of lockdown and the minimal performance opportunities on emerging talent and what that means to their development and getting established in the business. So welcome, Julie. Next up, we have Glenn Rowe. Fantastic to have Glenn join us. Glenn is the founder and manager of the Kyoto Music and Arts Management Company, providing top-line music acts with management resources, recording studios, writing rooms, and rehearsal spaces. Additionally, Glenn set up Kyoto Music, one of London's busiest rehearsal studio complexes, and founded, it was like Nico Trust, I can't even read that, a charity helping young and talented people get jobs in the live events industry. So Glenn will have to correct me on what that was. I can't see it on the screen. As manager for the UK rock act Muse, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Muse, since 2001, Glenn has worked with the band, headlining stadiums, festivals, arenas, TV shows, radio shows, and, his own words, super massive one-off events. I think not just super massive one-off events, of course. I want to briefly quote from the Kyoto website, and I did let Glenn know I was going to do this. This is from the Kyoto website. We're all about celebrating the brilliant, big live music that you hear in small, sweaty clubs and bars around the world. Our growing management roster includes some of the most exciting new musicians and artists in the UK today. I think we can all align with Glenn's purpose and goal here, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from Glenn on what's been happening these last few months, but especially on his views for the future, where certainly for the last few months go sweaty clubs and bars that we haven't been able to get into, and now obviously what life looks like without that. So welcome, Glenn. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
We'll name your charity, seeing as I messed it up completely.
NACO.
NACO.
Cat. Come on.
I do apologise. No, I would pronounce it if I could have read it. It was blurred on my screen. Most inappropriate point to lose a bit of resolution. So thank you.
Don't worry. No starving children will be upset with you.
So next up. We have Greg Morrow. Memphis, Tennessee native Greg Morrow is entering his 5th decade in the music business. Amazing to have you with us, Greg. Since moving to Franklin, Tennessee in '96, he has worked on numerous platinum albums and #1 singles. He has worked for a wide range of artists, including Bob Seger, Trisha Yearwood, Don Henley, Luke Bryan, Cole Swindle, Joe Bonamassa, Deanna Carter, Amy Grant. You can read the list. The list goes on. Dixie Chick, Steve Earle, Rodney Crowell, Lynyrd Skynyrd, and many, many others. He continues to record in studio as well, at his home facility, and tours where possible. Greg is incredibly modest, though. That looks like an impressive list. But I have to say, if you Google Greg's name, you will find a lot of reading there. He has an incredible list of artists he's worked with, not just in studios and on tour. He has twice received the Academy of Country Music Studio Award for Drummer of the Year. And so thank you very much to Greg for giving us some of your time to join the panel today. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm proud to be here with you.
Thank you. Welcome. Next up. So we have Adam Thurston. So Adam is the COO and co-founder of Audiotree, the music discovery and live streaming media company based in Chicago. Audiotree is best known for their streaming series Audiotree Live, Staged and Far Out. And in 2015, Audiotree acquired music venues Lincoln Hall and Scubas. Greg is, moving on. Not Greg, Adam, sorry. So I'm excited to have him join us today, not just as a venue owner, but especially as being involved in streaming before becoming a venue owner and prior to the pandemic. Is really interesting for today's discussion. Streaming's been a word which has kind of come into our general discussion all the time. With the absence of the opportunity to perform live, streaming has started to take over. It's definitely a focus of attention for getting content out to audiences. And Adam can give us a unique insight from both sides of that, both pre-pandemic, in the pandemic, and how that's connecting to venues. So welcome, Adam. Great to have you with us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So, Taylor Goldsmith, the lead singer-songwriter for the band Doors. Taylor's work has been widely recognized for his excellent storytelling and honest lyrics. Goldsmith draws influence from the Bonnie Prince Billy, Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, I'm losing to resolution again on my screen, Jackson Browne, who Doors have had the pleasure of playing with, and who has called Taylor a brilliant songwriter. Taylor and co-writer Sid Kohler recently received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Original Music and Lyrics for their song Memorized from the NBC show This Is US. In addition, this year they released their 7th studio album titled Good Luck With Whatever. As I said earlier, Taylor's been awarded or recognised for having honest lyrics. And I do particularly like the title of their 5th album, the title track being We're All Gonna Die. I don't think you get much more honest than that, to be fair. So welcome, Taylor. Good to have you with us.
I'm happy to be here.
So coming up, we're also from the band Doors, Griffin Goldsmith. So Griffin Goldsmith is a professional drummer, percussionist, vocalist, hailing from LA, California, all a little bit jealous, especially this time of year. Goldsmith, along with his older brother Taylor and rhythmic counterpart Willie Gelber, formed the band Doors. Griffin has also had the pleasure of playing alongside such greats as Jackson Browne, John Fogerty, Robbie Robertson, Phil Lesh, Elvis Costello, and world-renowned drummer Jim Keltner, and countless other contemporaries, both live and on record. His most recent collaborations include work on albums for William Tyler, J.R. Sondara, Jenny Lewis, Better Oblivion, Community Centre, and Mandy Moore. As a professional musician with considerable work outside the band as well as inside the band, I'm looking forward to finding out from Griffin how his typical work schedule has changed or been impacted by the pandemic, particularly in the midst of releasing an album during the pandemic as well. So I'm excited to hear how that's played out and what the general processes look like compared to a normal year. So welcome, Griffin.
Glad to be here.
And last, but definitely not least by any stretch of the imagination, John Harris. As a pioneer through many eras of remote recording, John Harris has been honoured with 12 Emmys, 3 Grammys, and a Peabody Award, and has mixed the music performances on the Grammy Awards for 30 years, picking up awards for his work along the way. He may be best known for his work with U2, Paul McCartney, Eric Clapton, and George Harrison. I've no idea who those people are, of course, among many others. John is presently working on a modern day take on traditional remote recording and mixing music over distance, something very apropos for our time. It's a privilege to have someone of John's standing join us today, and I greatly appreciate him extending his valuable time. Hopefully John can provide some insight to the technical changes and challenges to the events industry and the performance we've been able to see on screen, if not in person. So welcome, John.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
So by way of further introduction, wow, there we all are. What I'd like to do today is reflect briefly on the industry as a whole through the shared experiences of our panelists over the last year, starting from before the pandemic started to take hold in our business and the industry in general. I think many of us expected or certainly hoped that the suspension of mass gatherings or events or performances or gigs to most of us would be short-lived, and normality as we knew it would return within a few months. Clearly, reality today is very different from that expectation, the early expectation. And as an industry and as individuals, we've been forced to adapt. A quote from Benjamin Franklin that many of us have heard before is that out of adversity comes opportunity. I think that we've definitely faced adversity this year, and I do think opportunity has come from that. But where I'd like to finish today's panel discussion, hopefully, is by somehow accepting the adversity of the pandemic and finding the positive opportunities and change that it's created, and how that might be something to be positive and optimistic for in the future. So, with no further ado, I'm going to jump into maybe some questions to kick us off. And I think we're going to start with Taylor, if I can.
Sure can.
Obviously, I've said earlier, you launched an album. So you announced your album back, I think, in the summer in July. And it went out on early October. Great album, by the way. So check it out, anyone who's not checked that album out yet. But I'm curious to know, what was life for you looking like, January, February, beginning of this year? I don't know if you'd started the album then, whether that was a lockdown thing, but what's it been like from how you were, beginning of this year, 12 months ago to now? And what was the year looking like, and how did the album come about, and what's changed more your expectations? We
recorded our album in May of last year, June. So we were sitting on it for a long time, and our thinking was, we were still like in the middle of a album cycle when we recorded that album. So we thought like, well, we tour all the time. Maybe we could give our fans a break from how much we ask them to come to our shows. So we have this album on ice, and let's put it out in October of 2020. And let's maybe take a lot of the year off to sort of kind of revamp the demand for us to be on tour. Obviously, everybody ended up doing that same thing. But because we had made that album in like the summer of 2019, it felt important to us to still put it out, just because we didn't want to sit on it for too long and then fall out of love with it, and then put out something that just felt stale. Because I feel like if a band or an artist feels that way about their record, then that's intuited by the listeners, like the audiences. So it was important for us to still get it out. And the way that we rationalized it was like, yeah, we're not going to be able to capitalize on this in the short term. We're not going to be able to announce a tour around it, but the long-term benefits of a record for a band, particularly like us, where we've never had a hit, we've never had like a big huge moment. It's always been building a catalog. That's how we've gained anything. So for us, it's like we still had the same expectations for the long term, where even though this, as any artist, like we're proud of this album, and we thought if this album is as good as we hope it is, then yeah, we're not gonna see a big spike in sales necessarily, or even ticket sales, obviously. But I still think we're still building the castle. We're still building the catalog, and it's still worth putting it out there, even though it stings in the moment.
That's great. It's great to hear. I mean, how would you have expected to promote that album? If this was a normal year, you've put the album out, then what would you have been doing to promote that? Are you missing a typical round of gigs and performances, or have things like, I think you performed on Jimmy Kimmel Live during this year, which would have been helpful, but what are you missing in that normal sequence of getting an album out to market? We're one of those bands where our career has largely been shaped around touring. It's almost like fans of our bands, I don't want to speak for them, but I get the impression that some of them don't even have all of our albums, but they never miss a tour kind of thing. Like that seems to be the relationship. Like we seem to have a really strong relationship to the touring audience. And so when we're going to put out a record, it's all about touring. So we were really, looking forward to early October hitting the road and hitting it hard. So the fact that we couldn't do that is like, all the marketing, all the interviews, all the late night stuff, that's all great, but it's so much harder for us to qualify that, but it's not hard for us to qualify the touring. That part always feels like easily the number one way for us to spread the word and get the message out that we have new music available. Well, I certainly noticed that looking up your band online and doing a little bit of desktop research, that there's an awful lot of positive commentary for your live performances. And it's great to hear you say that. That's clearly what you're renowned for, that live performance. I want to just ask, how are you filling your time in between? Are you just sitting back? Is this an opportunity to think more artistically? Or are you just biding your time, waiting for the chance to get out and gig properly? I think
we've tried to figure out ways to feel productive, to feel like we're not like, you know, just looking at our watches waiting for the touring world to come back. So we've, you know, I know Griffin's done a lot of session work. I started co-writing like via Zoom through my publishing company, and I've enjoyed that more than I thought I would. And then I also scored a short film, and I've never done anything like that, and that was fun, but also scary because I had to do it by myself and no one to kind of help guide me. I was here at this desk by myself. But then also, not for nothing, I feel like it's not a coincidence that we ended up, you know, safely making another record. And this record that we just recorded, I think it's done. We might have to go back. I don't think so though. There's a lot of, it celebrates that live component of our band. There's several songs that are like 8 or 9 minutes. And I didn't think about this at the time, but after we made it and conversations with my brother and with my wife, it sort of, I sort of felt like it's not a coincidence that we made this record that is probably it celebrates that quality of ours most. There's the most, it's not just like, you know, just self-indulgent soloing, but there's a lot of composition, there's a lot of playing, there's a lot of interacting as musicians, there's a lot of space between verses. So it's built for the stage. And I think without really intending on it, I think the fact that we couldn't be on stage this whole year kind of inspired us to make that kind of record. So it's, you know, hopefully when everything comes back, I mean, I'm excited to hear what other folks are going to say about all coming back to all this. Cause like, that's the thing that freaks me out the most is like, you know, when we're all allowed to go back to venues, everyone's going to be clamoring to do it at the same time. And I'm curious if like everybody's share of the market is going to be trimmed down substantially or not at all. Maybe everyone's going to be so thrilled to go back to live concerts that everyone's going to have more fans than ever. I really don't know, but I do know that there are, like, it seems like normally everyone's scattered out with their touring cycles. If Dawes is on tour, then so-and-so who's comparable is not, you know? Whereas now it's like, once that gun gets fired, we're all going to be doing it at the exact same time. And I wonder what all you guys think that's going to look like.
That's a great point. Thanks, Taylor. Well, on self-indulgent musicianship, I think there's nothing wrong with that at all, but it works better live, I've got to say, than on an album, in my opinion. So just on that subject of getting back, I'm going to ask the question of Adam, just very briefly. We'll come back to this in more detail later. Obviously, you're running a venue in Chicago, but are you taking bookings? Is there any confidence at a point in the future? Are you booked out from X until somewhere for this to happen? And how ready would you be to respond if restrictions lifted and Adam and Taylor and the band, you know, management got in touch, said, hey, can we perform next week or something? Could you respond that fast?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. It's tricky because a lot of, you know, the two rooms we have here in Chicago, Lincoln Hall and Shuba's, which I believe the Taylor and the guys have played in at least Lincoln Hall once, maybe Shuba's at some point.
Yeah, we played at Shuba's. We opened for Deer Tick in Shuba's. I think it was like one of our first tours ever back in 2009, I think.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, we my business partner and I, who started Audio Tree, we bought the venue Shuba's in Lincoln Hall in 2015. So yeah, we kind of leapt into that game. But yeah, as far as the question regarding when things open back up, you know, our talent buyers have been, you know, at the beginning it was all this, you know, when it all went down in March and everything shut down, then it was sort of a rescheduling. Everybody was trying to reschedule for the summer or, you know, into the fall. And then it quickly became clear that live shows weren't going to happen that soon. So then it was another rescheduling mess of moving shows back again and trying to rescheduling. And I think after about the second or third time, everybody sort of said, all right, let's just put a pause on this and hold on, because that is the challenge. Even if, you know, let's say there is a date that it's all, you know, restrictions are lifted June 1st, it's still the process and the work in the background of scheduling tours, as everybody knows, is a 6, 8, 10 month process to put tours together. So that's has us a little nervous regarding that side. It's just like, okay, well, sure, there's going to be, you know, for us local bands, artists in Chicago that'll be ready to play, you know, pretty quickly. We can get those moving. But as far as getting back to our normal mix of nationally touring, international touring artists coming through, it might be another 6 or 8, 10 months until early 2022 before we can confidently, you know, put a show in and be able to book it and start selling tickets for it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all rolls out as far as live touring again. But man, miss the hell out of it. That's for sure.
Definitely missed that. So Julie, I want to come to you. It's interesting hearing Taylor talk about getting the album out there. Interesting to hear what you said. How's it worked for you? I mean, where were you 12 months ago with Sony and artists emerging and managing that talent? And what's happened to you since? And what's the general attitude for releasing albums right now from your perspective?
I mean, well, funnily enough, I just had my appraisal earlier. So it's kind of, I've just been reflecting on the year quite a lot, actually. And what Taylor said as well is, people are really desperate for things to entertain them. They're really desperate for new music. So anybody who's sitting on stuff and just waiting for this to get better, what? Just get on with it. Get it out there. People are desperate for it. And I mean, we had a top 10 record in the UK and top 4 in Germany with like sort of a really heavy metalcore band, because we did a great, interesting campaign that was all digital that everyone really engaged quite heavily with. And I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think I've been busier, which is really worrying to a certain extent. But I mean, I think it's a case of it's taken longer to do smaller things. But I also feel like I've never been more creative, because we've had to try a lot harder and we've had to reach out to people. And I mean, these things aside, which can be quite exhausting when you've just been on them for like 12 hours a day, it does mean that you talk more to people. Because I mean, I work in a really huge building of 500 people, and I speak to more people on these because it's easier and it's easier to get access to them than I really do in the building. So there's been a lot more collaborations come through. Artists are sitting at home licking the windows in boredom. So people are really, really keen to do collaborations and do more stuff that's interesting and actually think outside the box. I mean, ironically, myself and Glenn worked together on an artist. And a lot of people have pivoted in a lot of different ways so that they can actually get their music to people in engaging ways on the web. And I'm not talking about somebody just sitting in the kitchen with an acoustic guitar, destroying their career because no one cares. You know, I mean, people doing stuff that's actually really interesting and really kind of groundbreaking, because people have had to really think about this and they've had time to do it. So as awful as it is, and I mean, the whole Christmas thing is going to throw everyone into a tailspin, I think, anyway. And after that, when everybody's been licking each other because they've had 2 Prosecco's at lunchtime, it's going to be a nightmare for January and February. But I do think there are a lot of positives to take from this, in the fact that creativity hasn't stopped. And in fact, I think creativity and output from my artists and from the people I work with has gone up. And I think that is really positive. And sometimes it takes something like this to kick people in the pants to really think about it. But I mean, on the live front, we've changed and we've been able to maneuver things around so we can still have a live experience. But I was talking earlier today that I haven't actually really missed the festivals too much this year, because it's my first year off in like 30 odd years. And I've actually not been standing in a muddy field in Donington being rained on and getting pneumonia in June in the UK. You guys in the States are lucky. Over here, nah. Sometimes not good. But I mean, I'm really starting to miss proper shows now. And Adam, I mean, if you guys are keeping afloat and you're doing really well, I mean, I have to applaud you, because it's over here, it's like the support for venues is very, very negligible. And people have had to move into other things. They've had to like sort of, again, start recording podcasts and venues. Great idea. But I also think that the big worry we've got isn't just about the venues and live in general. It's about the live ecosystem. It's about people who work in live, like the tour managers. I'm working with the tour manager on a candle brand at the moment. He's a really big tour manager with his production manager, and they've like sort of turned to making like boutique candles. They're bloody good at it as well. But I mean, things like that, what's going to happen in June when that button gets pressed, when there's no lampies, you know, the tour managers are all booked, the bus companies have gone down, like sort of you know, if Glastonbury decides to go ahead, which we all probably know it won't, it's like, what's going to happen there when there's all of that like sort of massive ecosystem, when probably there's only maybe 20% of people left at the moment, because everybody's had to go and get other jobs and retrain and do other stuff. And then there's only going to be that 20% of people left, and there's just not going to be enough people to go around. I mean, that's my massive concern. So when we get back into that, that's going to be what our issues are. And how is it going to work? How are we going to do that? How are we going to, I mean, it's going to go back to the whole bands don't have any crew anymore, which sometimes isn't a bad thing. It's cheaper to be on the road, but band are going to have no crew. They're going to need a tour manager or a driver. maybe a merch person. Where are all these people? Are going to have to start taking their mums on the road or something. You know, there's going to be really a lot of fed up with the halves on the road doing favors for people.
Very interesting. When I want to touch on this a little bit later on in the conversation. I'll probably come back to Adam on this about streaming, and also with John with the remote mixing of events. And I can see, to your point, Julie, with minimal crew, if that's a reality in future, then taking whatever gigs we can get in whatever venues are available and pushing it out to a bigger audience on a streaming platform or for other mechanisms seems like that might be something that's going to develop in the future. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. I don't want to talk about something you mentioned, which was creativity. Taylor mentioned it, and I've seen that in Griffin's bio. Also done a lot of session work. Is certainly Greg's background is session work as well. And I've heard some people mention artistic renaissance, this kind of suppression of being able to get out and perform is just pushing more creativity. And it's been mentioned a couple of times by people already. And I wanted to talk to Greg. Spent a lot of time in the studio, worked with many people. Have you seen that? Is that what you're witnessing? This kind of people wanting to get their writing out and get something down and lay some tracks down. Are you getting more approaches to help out in that regard?
Well, from a remote standpoint, certainly, because people have gotten really itchy. You know, it didn't take long for everybody to get, you know, pretty impatient. And I know for me, it was about 3 days. And I have a good friend here named Dan Baird. The Dawes guys may know him. I don't know if they know him or not, but anyway, he was in the Georgia Satellites and just kind of an Americana guy, but a good friend. And I called him one day. I said, man, we got to do something. I knew he'd gotten a home rig together, and we had this band with Audley and Robert Kearns called the Fossils. You can figure out why we called ourselves that. But anyway, we just started passing stuff around and wound up completing some pretty nice stuff. But yeah, there's been a lot of interest in people collaborating, and I know the Zoom thing. Taylor had mentioned the Zoom writing. Man, that's a big thing here in Nashville, and he may have been doing some of that with people here. I don't know, but it's, you know, you just adapt and move. If that's the tool you got, that's what you use. You know. Because you don't want to be complacent and you don't want to be lazy. And quite honestly, we kind of all do this because it's compulsion. I mean, this is integral to our beings, you know, music and this process and just the communication you get in a band. You know, when you're playing, there's nothing like all that unspoken communication. As you're playing music, it's really something, and you long for that. So you find any possible way to do it, you know. So yeah, I don't know. That might be a little bit of a convoluted answer to your question, but yeah, people have been very persistent and in trying to just continue, just take a step a day. And it's, you know, for me, the good thing about it is it reestablished relationships that I had with people many years ago that I haven't had a relationship with in a long time. Because, you know, you get in and out of people's universe, but some of them have come back around now because they heard, oh well, I think he can work at home. So let's see how that goes. And it's been great. I mean, from that standpoint, yeah.
Absolutely.
I hope it was an answer.
No, not at all. Not a long answer. Supports what I've been hearing from people in that increase in creativity and creative thinking. Like you say, it's a compulsion. It's what people do, and one of the outlets to perform live in front of an audience has been removed. So we've got to do something. And if that's going into writing and content, then of course we're storing up a lot of stuff for the future, which is great. I'm conscious that. Obviously, we've got John, Glenn, and Griffin I've not spoken to yet. I wanted to just ask Griffin the same question, really. I mean, yeah, luckily out on the LA coast, California, you've got the beach and the sea there. Has this just been a great opportunity just to get out and enjoy where you live a bit more? Has it been the same for you? Have you been called in for session work and seeing some of that creative thinking kind of expand and become busier?
Yeah, I at first, certainly, we were in New York in March, gearing up to do a tour with Taylor's wife, Mamie Moore, because we had previously made that record. So when we flew home, obviously everything had been canceled, and I, for one, was certainly thanking my lucky stars that I even had a yard to sit in, because I can't imagine being stuck in an apartment in New York, as so many were. So LA definitely has its upsides, as you can imagine. And in terms of work, I think at that point, pretty much the week that it went down, I went ahead and like bought some recording gear, because it's something that I had been meaning to do for a while anyway, but we've been touring so much for the last decade that I never really got around to it. So right at the beginning, kind of to Greg's point, it was like, I have to do something. I got to figure this out and just find a way to spend my time. And there was certainly like a good amount of remote stuff to keep me busy. And in the first few months, it seemed like, at least for me, from my perspective, it seemed like studio work had shut down almost completely, because we all still had no idea what this thing was. And then probably around May, June, it picked up a bit. And then it honestly got really busy for me, which is great. But, you know, I mean, it's like, it's definitely, I think everyone's making records because we can't tour, and people are, to Julie's point, are finding ways to be creative. Like they need to do something, and it's definitely inspired some pretty awesome music, but obviously it feels a little bit weird being in a studio with folks masked up for a couple days at a time, when you're like, everybody can get tested because we're at LA, and it's easy enough, or it was easy enough. But still, it feels like if you're in a studio for 3 days working on a record, by the end of the 3 days, even if you guys are all masked up and tested, it seems like, okay, if one of us was exposed to this thing, like we all are. So it didn't necessarily seem like the best idea, but like a lot of people, it's like our work disappeared. So when those opportunities came along, it's like, I definitely want to do this because I got to stay busy.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to that as well as we move through this. Just, you know, how much of that stays, how much of this just moves away and we forget about it and go back to normality, and then what does the future balance of those things look like? So before I get to John, it's really going to kind of talk to John about, you know, the mixing events and what events looks like. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Before I go to that, though, I'm going to go to Glenn, because obviously you've got these bands, you know, under your management, and we've already shared the clear statement from you that we love to get in those hot, sweaty, thick clubs and around the world and do our thing, which is not happening. So how is it from your perspective? You've got your finger in a lot of different pies as well. So just wondering how things look for you and the talent that you're managing and working with.
Well, I guess luckily or unluckily for me, I wear more hats than Jamiroquai. I have always got 4 or 5 full-time projects on the go. And what March has brought me is, like Julie said, I've never been busier. And I thought I was the busiest man that I knew until this. Oh, by the way, we're allowed to swear. I just realized that I've been speaking for 10 seconds, I haven't sworn. Just to make sure that don't drop any clangers. But Peter's out, okay?
You're good. Your head's no more shiny than it was earlier. You're fine.
Thank fuck for that. Anyway, so my point is, so I have a residential studio, which for the other drummers on this call, I am a recovering drummer. You know, it's that thing of recording studios. I built a recording studio for drummers in a beautiful part of the English countryside, to make sure that we could do something. And with all of my rehearsal studio businesses that we have, which have all died because no one's rehearsing because they've got nothing to rehearse for, our studios, it's literally been fully booked since COVID struck, right? So the recording business has been really good, and because it's a residential studio, when you come in those gates, you don't see another human being. So from that perspective, business has been okay for me. The rehearsal studio business has been shocking. The band management thing is heartbreaking. I mean, I can't say anything other than all of the acts that we have all make money from going out on the road, and not just if they don't make money from going on the road, it all interconnects. No one lives in a sphere on their own anymore. It doesn't matter how big a record artist you are. You've got to sell T-shirts. We all know we make more money from merch than we do from record sales. So, and at the moment, if it doesn't all interconnect, those cogs don't move, right? And I feel heartbroken for the bands who who was supposed to be on tour throughout America and then go to Australia and going to Japan, and had some, and as we talked about earlier, the whole year written off. And then I thought, okay, well, let's do it later. And then I thought, well, actually, no, let's not do anything until the time comes that we know something's going ahead. And to answer some of the points you were talking about earlier that Julia mentioned, and a lot of people have been talking to me about, is the panic of when we start. And that's what NACO Trust does. We're helping young people get into this live events industry and let them be the next tour managers, production managers, backline techs of the future, because we know that when that gun gets fired, there's going to be a big scrabble, there's going to be no one around. And my view is there's a load of people who want to be in this industry, have amazing transferable skills, but don't have the knowledge of how to do it. So I've been sitting here since March trying to figure out, right, I'm managing bands, I've got got record label partners, we've got our agents, we've got promoters. Why can't we all just come plugging back in together? And the only way we can do that is by doing something good. So that's what NACO stands for. NACO is the live events industry charity in the UK that wants to help people get in this industry and make a living, because we're a long way from reality. We won't be in those sweaty venues that I love so much until at least September next year, in my opinion.
It's interesting. Just on the subject of, those live performances, obviously Muse are well renowned for their spectacular shows. They've closed out a number of festivals, opened others, and just have a fantastic reputation for those big spectacular shows. I mean, Julie's point about, crews and technical staff. Do you think those big shows will be there? Do you imagine there'll be a dropping down to a level, and the huge spectacular things won't be as big, or do you think they'll go bigger, that will come out of this with something more spectacular?
I think reality is going to bite us in the arse for a little while, where the big bands are going to want to go out and play those football stadiums and make sure that, they don't want to do what they always do. That's what Coldplay does. But I think there's a reality. Coldplay's crew will come back. They'll lose some of their long-serving crew to the world, but there'll always be other people who want to get on board with that. I think the appetite for those bands to go on the road is obviously bigger than ever. But let's be honest, with how many people can afford the price ticket of those big events for quite a while? It's going to be a balancing act that's going to be very difficult. And I would personally like to see a lot of the arenas open up and find a way to balance, because the numbers don't work. You can't. It's very, very, very expensive to rent a stadium. I could show you some figures that would make your eyes fall out. It's a big business, and when if we can't pack those things in, no one makes any money except for everybody. And if the band don't make any money, and the promoter doesn't make any money, then the wheels don't turn. So it's going to be a very delicate balance for all of those stadium arena acts. And I think what I would love to see is the small venues open up as fast as possible and turn the much needed beginning of the industry back up again, because that's where the next Ed Sheeran's playing in a pub in front of nobody now, right? So let's find them, discover them, and make sure the ecosystem isn't fucked forever.
Yeah. That's a great point. I'd love to see a future where a lot of those smaller venues are open 5 or 6 days a week. That would just be amazing, that you could just pick live music any day of the week and just have a look at what's out there and go and do that. So hopefully that will be a good outcome from this, is the breadth and quality and range of music available to consume and get out and see what is going to improve. I certainly hope so. It's a good time to bring John in. So John has an awesome track record of some of the biggest events, mixing those live in a remote sense. And certainly what we've heard here, there's a number of elements that have been touched upon here. And I think Glenn started to mention some of this in terms of cost. There's a number of things that kind of line up with that. There's the travel cost. We've got concerns over, is travel available to get around? What's it going to cost when it opens up again to move? Price of tickets, potential recession. Is there enough people out there to pay those big ticket prices? The availability of crew, to Julie's point. Environmental issues. That's all that was coming up before we even hit the pandemic, with some bands talking about wanting to step away from touring and what comes with it. And then there's overall risk, both risk to health and of course the financial risk, which is holding people back making bookings, all of which talks to some of what you touch upon, John, which is, mixing events for broadcast or live streaming and getting what's happening out to an audience at a distance. Do you envisage more of that happening and more demand for your services? And what challenges do you imagine we might face in expanding that and seeing more of that kind of discipline?
Well, I don't think I'd see a lot of disadvantages at all. I'd been working on getting this kind of methodology together for a long time, mentally anyway, getting it together and understanding a new way I've been doing live events for a long time, and they've been done in a very traditional way, and it's an expensive way to do it. And I can only fly to Los Angeles and do a show, that's going to take 3 days to rehearse and 2 days to put on. And then we do a broadcast, and then we travel home, and trying to find a friendlier way to do live events. And that's what I started out anyway, trying to develop this method to do what I do. I think everybody on the panel has been trying to figure out how to make their own craft, their own creative stream work inside this thing. And it happened to be that the thing I was trying to create outside the pandemic, inside the pandemic, became incredibly relevant. And again, I was just trying to keep myself in my creative river of live events. That's what I do. Things that are on TV all over the world right now. That's what I do traditionally. And ever since we've been tooling this up to make that work, it's taken on a life of its own in other people's lives that it never occurred to me. We worked on a Broadway play, shooting it for a film. We did a COVID-friendly country festival over time. But we did an audio book of Smokey Robinson sitting in his home. A friend of mine is doing a record with a duo in England, controlling it from New York City. And we're working with some really high-end studio engineers whose artists don't want to come to the studio. So they want to send remote facilities to the artist in a friendly way, so that when the artist puts on headphones, he's talking to the engineer as if he was right there, and they're able to carry on their craft. So, and I think going forward, once venues open up, they're not going to open up. The stadiums aren't going to open up. They're not going to open up the Staples Center and do a show as soon as the relaxation of what we're allowed or should do is going to grow gradually. So if we can all interconnect our creative juices, whether you're a drummer or the singer or the engineer or management or writing, if we could collaborate musically over distance, we can all obtain what we need, I think. And going forward, I just don't see, if we could establish a good way in my little narrow part of the world, if we could establish a good way to do live TV music performance, at the end of this, are the producers going to say, you know what, I really liked flying 20 people out here and paying for diesel fuel and per diem and all that, and we don't need what you're doing, John, anymore, because now we can go back to that. Does that make sense economically in my industry? I don't think so. And again, creatively, we can allow everybody who's now stuck in their home studio that used to be a bedroom to collaborate with their artist or collaborate with their engineer and carry on doing what they natively do. I think that's going to go on. And I think that I've met people, again, in Broadway and in all these disciplines that I never really was around too much before, but people have this need and they're looking for that Swiss Army knife. What is the thing that we can plug into all these needs that that creatively and musically can allow everybody to carry on? So I think that everybody's developing their future and how they're going to do it and what tools are they going to use to carry on. And that's what I'm trying to do anyway.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We're about a halfway point in the time we set aside for this. So great to kind of change gear a little bit, but focus on something John just said. And that was, how do we, if we're not going to these big events, how do we kind of collaborate better and bring some of those things together? And there's some changes in technology recently that we've seen. So we saw, I think it was about a year, 18 months ago, DJ Marshmello appeared inside the game Fortnite. I think Travis Scott did it again in the summer this year, actually put a gig inside a game. There's also that sense of, you can watch a filmed event like Hamilton, theatrical performance of Hamilton went out live on Netflix or Disney or something this year, which is great if you've seen Hamilton. I don't think it's definitely not the same as being in a theatre watching it be performed. There's no doubt about that. It makes me wonder about thinking of Adam's position with two venues is actually performing in one venue and connecting to a second venue. So you can have crowds of people. One pays the highest price to be with the band and the other pays a lesser price to see the band on a big screen, knowing that they're somewhere else with other people watching them. There's a number of things that kind of come through that. I'm going to open the floor up for anyone who wants to kind of pick up and raise their hand and answer a question on their thoughts about other ways to get performance out without necessarily booking a stadium to get in front of a large audience. Anyone want to pick that up and share their thoughts around that and what the future might hold?
Well, I think economically, as I was trying to say before, if traditionally with Muse, I worked with bands like that, and that it requires a huge village of technology and people and structure to put them out in a proper way, sounding and looking the way they need to sound and look, out to broadcast, whether it's to the, streaming television is all the same thing now, and the quality has got to be across the board correct. So if we could create a different economy to that, you don't have to have 10 tractor trailers and 200 men to put a proper broadcast together. If we could do this in a remote way, if the video's robotics and we do what we do with our systems and bring all the creativity to it, we could change the economy of that kind of delivery. And so when the venues come back and you put Muse in a 200 seat club, you could tie them to their entire fan base worldwide in an economical way and create that kind of delivery done in such a way that it is suited to the artist and make it make sense monetarily.
I've got this feeling that and I knew I should have done it before this call started, but I should be trademarking the word hybrid shows, because the what we're going to get out of this, it's not going to be the same. And just exactly like you were just saying then, John, the point is you can do a small show and broadcast it to millions of people. The cinemas in the UK really got behind this about 10 years ago, and there's a live show that gets broadcast in the cinema. So that the sound quality is good because it's cinema audio is good and the visuals are good, but there's always that thing, isn't there, that missing part of the environment.
Absolutely.
But even though audio great, visuals are great, but somehow the boy or girl next to you doesn't smell as good as when you're in the room on your own and the band are there. There's that magic, there's that key thing that binds us all together. And looking forward, it's all about hybrid. Hybrid shows, hybrid concerts. Every band are now going to have to be trying to afford some way of delivering something where they do the performance for those in the room, and then those who go out and watch it at home and monetize that. And it's never going to go back. It's going to be like that. I have Julie and I were very lucky to work with an amazing act called Never Not Nothing, who I've sat down in this time and we've been thinking about, right, how do we redo things? And we've now got this thing called sonic shock therapy, where we're going to take some small amount of numbers of people. So this isn't going to make the band any money, but we're going to give them an experience where it's about immersive audio. It's about feeling like you're in the front row of the concert all the time. And that's the kind of thing that I'm excited by, but I know it won't move the needle financially, but it will give it'll give, what's that amazing immersive play I went to see in New York that you must have all been to see in the Mackenzie Hotel, where you
Drowned Man.
What's it called?
The Drowned Man. Is it one of the Punch Drunk ones?
McKendrick.
McKendrick, that's it.
He played there, yeah.
That called
Never.
Sleep No More.
Sleep No More.
Yeah. Right. If any of you have been to see Sleep No More, if anybody here hasn't, I don't get paid by them yet, but it's fucking amazing, right? It's this new way of we all seem to be programmed to go into a room, whether it's church, whether it's a rock concert or a pop concert, and we look in one fucking direction. And I keep saying, why are we all sat next to each other in 2020? Why aren't we looking? If there's a 4-piece band, why aren't they in each corner? Why? We've got some big questions to re-ask ourselves when we come back out. And when you go and see Sleep No More, it's like the plays version where rock and roll should be and modern music should be. We've come out of this thing. Let's rip up the other ideas and start thinking about how we can make these things. And I can't wait to. Maybe if I can reconnect with you all in January when we've actually got these showcases done, because it's great when you feel what this band are doing and you're in the room there and being part of it. It's something really exciting.
I'm interested. I agree that I think right now, especially with anything that certainly that we've been packaging, or it seems like any band, to play into the fact that it's not. That we're not on the stage playing to our fans. So I think everybody's had to take a hard look at what we're providing and how we're providing it. But I'm curious as to why you think that will sustain and be part of live shows to come. Because the way I see it, it just seems like everything that everyone's trying, as cool as a lot of it is a stopgap measure. And it seems like the only thing that'll, get us back is when the world actually opens back up and we have live music again.
I guess monetary value of you're going to sell 10,000 seats, but if you can sell 10,000 seats at $50, but then sell 60,000 tickets at $1, people are going to pay it. And if they're not in the room, if they can pay $1 and be close to the room, you'll see a massive take up.
Now, do you worry about something like if a band wants to do? I'm sure you've already thought through this. I'm just asking out of my own ignorance. Like if that's the new paradigm, does that infringe upon actually routing full tours? Because if I want to go see a giant band and it's like, okay, I'm not going to go to the actual show. I'm going to just, I'm going to do this hybrid thing and take advantage of my being at home and safe. And so I'll watch the show. And now the band is coming to my town, but I've seen the show. I've seen the product through my screen and I paid a lot less and I don't want to pay the $50. So is the band is it going to stop making, it's sort of like what you're describing, like sounds like perfect for a one-off, but how do we use that and turn it into like a tour?
Well,
if at all.
Well, yeah, I see your point. My rationalization is Muse had the same girl at the same front row in the same seat for 70 shows out of 90. So that one fan came to 70 shows, and I'm talking about one band, and then I started to realize, oh, hang on, I know all of these people. I recognized all of the Muse front row for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's what they do. They go more than once.
You don't think at any point there'd be, sorry to interrupt.
No. I don't think, they're being there in the room is the magic, but there are, armies of people who will take a second watch. How many times have you watched the same film twice?
Well, especially with a band like Muse, just because their reach is so tremendous. But you don't think at any point there'd be a diminish in returns? Because I'm, for us, when we go to Nashville, we count on the same 2,500 people to come to the show every time we play Nashville. And I wonder, I'm obviously not basing this on anything but just like supposition, but I would think that some of our fans, if they had our fans and anyone's fans, they only have so much disposable income, especially in the year to come. I wonder if they've spent their 10-15 bucks seeing Dawes on the computer while we play in a different city, if they're gonna actually come to our show. I mean, I guess my point is, I think I could totally see that scenario playing out with a band like Muse or with the Rolling Stones, because they're two of the biggest bands in the world. But I guess, how does that translate? And do you think that a paradigm like that would be as profitable for a band such as us?
I really hope it's affordable. I think Doors are the perfect kind of band where you should be looking at, how can you monetize from my view on this, and I'm sure everyone disagrees with me, but my view is, I've watched a ton of these live stream shows, and overall they're way too expensive. And I'm the guy who's put tickets on sale for really expensive shows, but to watch something at my computer, even a band I love, there's a small amount of money, and I think everyone's got too greedy too soon.
Yeah.
And I would like to see, and I said, the reason I said $1, I think that it's worth $1. It's worth $1 to somebody if you can really pull out that piece of spread.
I think it would be affordable on tour. Like, I think that is definitely something that we could implement. But I just wonder if at a certain point we would start seeing diminishing returns, because we have a finite base, and it's like, if folks were paying to see us live, then and back to Taylor's point, like, I do, and we experienced this before COVID. I do think there's a crazy oversaturation right now, because of just the way that the industry is structured. We're all forced to tour all the time to make a living. So I wonder. I mean, again, Muse is obviously the headliner, but with us, it's like, okay, I watched Dawes last week, and from a fan's perspective, maybe I watched Dawes last week on my computer, but now they're in town. But so is Wilco, so is Gary Clark Jr. That makes it a little bit tougher for us. And at that point, it's like, maybe we caught that fan and made a little bit more money when they watched us a week ago. But now that we're in their city, even if we're making more money doing it, I worry that, like, if that person didn't come to the show, we would feel the lack of a presence, Yeah.
I mean, Julie and I talk about this a lot, and we talk about when you're breaking a band, the most important thing is always to find new fans. And when you've got your band, you never want to be a heritage band. You want to make sure you're always finding that new ground. And I hope that if I'm watching a Doors show and I'm really, and I'm into it, and I've spent as little money, but guess what? I buy your t-shirt, or I might buy 2 of your t-shirts. I might buy your record and go, and then pass it on to my friends. And I've talked about this all my career, which is, when I wear a Doors t-shirt, I'm paying to advertise your band. And I love that. I love the fact that music lovers, in sports, they're kind of the two big things in my life of, a football fan will wear their shirt, and they probably won't wear anybody else's shirt. But bands, we always wear them, and we share, we wear our hearts in our sleeves. And by connecting to your show, buying your record, wearing your t-shirt, and 10 fuckers outside seeing that, somebody else might buy your record. Somebody else might pay $1 to go and see those things. It's about being brave and survival of the nicest, being survival of the fittest, and being always re-energizing what was the old school can't be going forward. We've got to think of new things, and I hope you make loads more money.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the money's almost secondary. I think the money will follow if you can create the culture, like you're saying. And I wonder if do you view this as like an analog or an extension of taping culture, like what the Dead did?
Yeah, I do. I think, hey, there's amazing people on this call. For podcasts and bands, one of the things that I always wanted to do with music, and I never did, and it's one of the things I want to help somebody do, was the fans want to know everything about the band, right? They don't just want to just go and see their concerts. So interview the chef, interview the personal trainer, give them an inside. There are, we talked about, there are 3 members in Muse. There's 300 crew, right? So there's different people who are part of that big thing to happen, and it's not just Muse, it's all those big bands. There's something really exciting to talk about with everybody. Talk to the venue owner who's had the band in, and how if they how they found the experience. Talk about what's going on, and I think there's magic there. I've always said that when I think back to, and I always feel like I'm a teenager, which is a big problem, and it's a problem gets worse every year.
I don't want to interrupt you, Glenn, in your full flow. I just want to jump in very quickly, because there's a number of themes coming through here that I think are worth exploring with some of our other panelists. What I do want to say first was I did capture this and extract it from what Glenn was saying, and that was that Glenn did clearly say Doors are a perfect band. I don't know if you heard that. It was pretty cool. So well, I take that as a quote away from this panel. Well done, Glenn.
Yeah, we're going to put that. That'll be the sticker on our next album.
Oh yeah, I wish.
World's most perfect band.
Yeah.
There you are. But I think you did touch on something there. And this kind of talks to kind of everybody involved on this call, really. And that is that, how do you provide, something different to just being, to monetize a performance in a different way that gives it real value that people want to engage with? And I think some of this is, age demographic and personal experience. I mean, in the UK, the BBC covers Glastonbury pretty well. It doesn't cost anything to watch that if you've got, access to a TV set or iPlayer. I don't think that stops anybody who wants to go to Glastonbury going to Glastonbury. It's not an alternative just to watch it on TV. Get a ticket, you go. But I also think from other interests of mine, like motor racing, there comes a point where you will drive to France and go to the 124-hour race, but above a certain age, you won't tolerate the crappy camping and the horrible journey and the awful accommodation and the lack of toilets, or just using a hole in the ground. So you're going to grow out of some of these things. But I also think that there's a different way to experience a live event. And I'm curious, probably from John's perspective also, of just how you, and I think Glenn did touch on this as well, and that's there is this 300 crew. So can you take, a live show which could be streamed, but actually premiumize that content, give people access to the band, to the musicians, to the crew, to the venue, in a way which is a subscribed service, that you actually experience that in a different way? So I'm curious to just people's opinions about that conceptually. I mean, the gaming thing gives an insight to that, getting into the game and watching it, but actually just, you're not just going to, log into the gig at this time, watch the gig, then go back and watch something else on television or whatever service you're using, but actually get into the gig in a different way, different angles, different positions, get on the stage with the band. The things you can't do if you're there. How do you experience that gig in a different way? So I'm going to go straight to John, actually. John, this is really your area of the kind of technical side of extracting something from distance and doing something with it. How do you feel about that? Is that already happening? Do you see that kind of capture backstage?
No, I don't see it very much. No, I've worked on a couple of things that I could talk about that were a great version of that. But I love what Glenn said. I think that's a great idea. And you could, once touring actually comes back, and once Muse does have 300 people on stage, you could completely employ what I'm pitching here, or what I'm talking about, into that. But that's when the world returns. What I think we've all touched on really quickly is, how do we get from here to there, and what's that transitional time? And to Griffin and Taylor's point, we could, once Dawes comes back, they're not going to go back straight into their venues at full attendance. So this transitional time, if you use this kind of methodology, so you can go out and play now, and you can play to 25 people, and that's all you can play to in Dallas. Or you could even make it local to Dallas. You could say, okay, everybody else in Dallas can see the show. They couldn't get in the venue, so they either didn't see it and didn't pay for anything, or they did see it and they paid $1. And I think that's a great idea, again, from Glenn. And so if we kind of take these tools that we've got and move from no performance to full performance, as we move through that curtain of technology or methods that we're going to do this with, when we come out the other side, we're going to find new things for them. To Glenn's point about making mini documentaries and super fan-based programming and all that within the show. And so I think it's the thing to do now is to get from point A to point D. We've got to go through B and C, and what's that going to be? And that's what I think that there's so much creative juices going on, like I said, in different disciplines to just make it happen whatever way we can make it happen. If we've done performances where they allowed 10 people into a club and they had to distance around, but we did stream it to 400 more. So, and then as COVID releases and the fans get larger in the venue, will they get smaller online? I don't know, but I think that it's still a good tool to have everybody move forward and keep the hammer that they found halfway through the transition and use it to hit a nail on the other side. And I still love Glenn's idea about that.
That's great. Support for Glenn and Glenn's support for the band as well. Awesome.
Peter, I've got a question from the internet, and I think I'll direct it at Adam first because I think he's got some real life examples. But the question from the stream is, where are we at with the one click to pay, say $1 access to streams to reduce friction? I always hear people not wanting to spend anything for an online show because it's annoying to sign up, confirm email, do all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, geez, yeah. I mean, there's so many things in the conversation we've been having in the last 20 minutes that, our hands are involved in across the board. I mean, to put it in perspective, the two venues that we have are Shuba's and Lincoln Hall. It's 200 cap room and a 500 cap room. So from the beginning of time, we've always been working with artists on their way up. It's a smaller room. It's a lot of times it's the first rooms that a lot of artists play DAWs on their way on to, bigger and better things in bigger rooms. And so we found ourselves sort of uniquely positioned in the way that when restrictions get lifted, coupled with what our other company Audio Tree does, which is live streaming. And we've started that in 2010. We've got a studio here in Chicago that we do recording and everything of that sort. But we started just on the early side thinking like, hey, let's just start capturing this content. Let's start streaming these live sessions from our studio. At that point, we had no business model because YouTube wasn't even really a thing. And we just thought we'd start streaming, we'd start capturing, and we'd see where it went. Then YouTube started. We started to put sessions up online. Then we found this great fan base that started following us because we were getting artists in that were, again, on their way up, early in their careers. And so we started to build this fan base of people that were hungry to discover new music. And then that was met with artists and managers and PR types that were writing us like, hey, can we get our band on? Because now you guys have, now we have 700,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. And so that's where we kind of started our company with Audio Tree. And then when we purchased the venues, it was sort of in 2015, it was sort of a natural progression for us for an opportunity to just capture more music and capture more content. So we were uniquely positioned when the pandemic set in to really continue on and keep creating content and doing things, even though we couldn't have fans in the rooms, obviously. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of things we're still working through. The ticketing concept, I mean, we've worked with a couple different providers. We currently use one called Veeps, which is real smooth. It's got great chat functionality and a bunch of other things that we really like. But there's still some definite, annoyances with login and people getting annoyed by having to do that. Why can't I just hop on, put in a credit card number and be able to hop on and watch the band and throw them, donate some money to them if we want. So it's interesting because the thing that I, of course, I've not in or never have been in a band. So from, Taylor and Griffin's perspective, I see we for a long time have run into that before now that like live streaming is the only thing people can do. So of course we're busier than we've ever been, not at the venues, obviously, but as Audio Tree, which is our production media company. But the thing that we've said forever and ever is nothing is ever going to replace being at a show. Like Glenn said, nothing is ever going to replace being at a show. And the example of the woman who went to 70 of 90, there's going to be those people in every market. And I don't think anything in the live streaming side is ever going to replace that. What we're finding is that it's actually introducing more music. Using Dawes as an example, if we were to do a staged show, which we do at Lincoln Hall, and we're also starting to do them in LA, Nashville, DC, because we've been getting reached out to by other venue owners that are like, hey, I've got this beautiful room. It's sitting here dormant. Can we do something? You guys are really good at this. So we've actually had some conversations, and hopefully in January, February next year, we're going to start doing some more of these staged live streams from these other rooms where we sell tickets. And it's been great. I mean, yeah, it's not, again, we're working with artists that are on their way up. But I mean, we've done 25 of these shows this year so far, and we've grossed over $150,000 from those shows. And most of that money we end up paying out to the artists, smaller artists. It's great. I mean, hey, it's something. So we feel like we're positioned to where we can help be in that spot where we can help get this kick started as soon as possible. Because I think it is going to be that sort of hybrid thing where maybe if we can only have 50 people in the room, well, we can sell 50 tickets at $25 to a show. But if we put an artist like Dawes or someone in that realm online and had a, even if it was a $10 or $15 ticket, we'd probably sell 3,000 tickets online. And then every band that we've had in, they just sell astronomical amounts of merch and all this stuff. And there's people tuning in from Indonesia and all over Europe and Australia and all these places that would probably have never, ever had a chance to see most artists perform. And that's really who we see like our core audience becoming. It's not, I think, of course, if you live in Chicago or LA or major market or anywhere around the world near a major city, there's music venues that you can go see shows, but probably most people in this world don't live within 100, 200 miles of a music venue. So if you can have a way to present the content that's something, that the people can watch in the comfort of their own home, as long as it's high quality, and it can be done in an affordable way. I think there's a lot of people that would be interested in this now and into the future. Again, it's funny because we're on both sides of it. We own 2 music venues, so we don't ever want to have like live streaming cannibalize the live music business. But I don't think it's ever going to. I don't think that's ever going to be something that can ever be replaced. So we're actually looking at this in the short term as something we can do to help kickstart things and get things moving. But then also perhaps in the future, it kind of opens some minds to the idea that like, hey, there's some really good quality content. I can pay a little bit of money, support the artists that I like. And even though I live in, Tulsa, Oklahoma or something, and I can watch a great show and I don't have to drive a few hundred miles to, whatever the closest town in that an artist like Dawes would come tour through. So yeah, it's interesting. Things are definitely going to change. A lot of things are going to be shuffled out. It's going to be really tough to open. I believe Glenn mentioned, I'm not sure, but opening up and starting, or maybe it was Julie, once we start back up, it's going to be tough because so many people are going to be out of work for so long, and it's so hard to just flip on the switch and get going. Again, we're uniquely positioned because we have a 200 and a 500 cap room. It takes a very talented team of 8 or 10 people to do it, and those people will be ready to get back up and running as soon as possible. So we're thinking that hopefully this can get things going as quick as possible. But as far as the long term, it's going to have to start back small, kind of get everybody working again, and kind of build back out to the full festivals and arena tours that are, we all want to get back to, of course. But yeah,
that's great. That gives me a perfect opportunity to ask this next question, because this sounds like it's from an educator who's asking the question, how would the panel suggest we promote the live worlds of theater and events to students who are now considering moves into broadcast, studio, or other sectors, with possible openings now on the market where people are moving into other things that Julie and Glenn mentioned and Adam just mentioned?
Well, I could speak to that a little bit. I teach a course at a university here in Philadelphia that's we used to be called Live Mixing for Broadcast, where, well, I guess it still is, where we would record a concert, film it in some way. And I would teach, my course would be to teach the planning of the execution of it, mixing and delivery of a live music performance show. And this year we couldn't do it. And so we used one of our systems, or built one like it at the school, and sent the system around to the jazz band of the university. And through a lot of guide tracks and musical creativity, we recorded an entire jazz band album, and put it on the market, or whatever the school label would be. But anyway, I taught the course in how to do it this way, and rather than the traditional sense, how we need to accomplish this album. This needs to happen. The dean of the school wants this album to happen. We're going to have to figure out how. So tried to bring that creativity and that methodology to the students. And I think it's important, whatever that educator makes a great point. Whatever we're going to do, we're going to have to make it into something we're going to pass on to the future of engineering, in my case of engineering. How are we going to solve these problems, and not just do it within our community, but grow it in the school.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I had a question for Julie. You were encouraging your acts to put out content, put out new music. Dawes has done that recently. But I was curious how the labels are treating new artists, and are they signing new artists, artists that have already signed that they haven't? Are you holding off music for those artists? How is that going?
Before I get into that, I wanted to say something about live, actually, because I've got a little thing that worries me about live, and it's a generation of kids coming through who have never experienced live as live. They'll be experiencing music through this. That terrifies me, just for the record. But I was just wondering what everybody else thinks about that. I mean, I think Glenn's hit the nail on the head in the fact that we're going to have hybrid shows moving from now onwards for people like us who are really desperate for that human connection. And then for the people who either are used to doing this and this is what they're happy with, or for people who are just too scared to go into that kind of environment. And that's a massive reality. And I mean, with all of the stuff that's going on over here and in the States, it's like this will happen again, I would imagine, because the human race has become compromised. And I think it's something that we need to think about. But anyway, enough of the doom and gloom. Young artists, brilliant. We love them. We're still signing and actively looking for new artists to bring through. And I mean, my background is independent music. So I ran my own company for 25 years and came into Sony nearly 5 years ago now as a label head to work as a people who foster talent in the UK. So, I mean, we've been constantly signing throughout this whole shebang. And I think now is a better time to do it because, again, what we were saying before about the levels of creativity going up, I'm not worried about them not playing live yet. What I'm interested in people doing is creating and continuing to create, and then we'll work a way around it and how we can make that live aspect function. And I mean, for me, it's about having the artist and supporting the artist and then helping them in other ways right now. Because I think it was it John who said, you've got your tools, just use the tools that you've got at the moment. If stuff isn't there, you can't use it. You've got to think of other ways of doing stuff. So for me, and I mean, Sony in general, definitely signing new artists. And actually the majority of people I have as friends at other labels too, people aren't scared of signing and working and developing artists now. Because I mean, there's so much creativity going on. It's got to go somewhere, and we've got to be able to channel it somewhere. We've got to be able to help people, I think, and actually support them in what they're doing. Because when the live thing comes back, they'll be supporting us, you know. So it's a symbiotic relationship. So I think now if we don't sign new artists, it's remiss of the industry.
That's great.
I think we definitely found the opportunity out of adversity. That's certainly what this discussion seems to have moved towards. Plenty of opportunity going forward. Rick, do you have any more questions coming from YouTube? I'm conscious I don't want to give up on external guests?
We are a
viewers?
technology company, and our audience is asking some specific questions about suggestions for software or hardware in regards to live music collaboration, and something that would provide, the least latency. How are you accomplishing that, Dawes or John?
I mean, I'm so new to this that like I bought a UA Apollo console just to record from home, and I guess the big thing with those is that there is no latency. But it's my first time recording myself because I'm used to being in studios, so I can't even imagine a world in which there was latency. So this is probably a question better.
Well, you'll know it when you hear
Better
it.
answered by John. Yeah.
Well, the trick to what we're doing, the latency that you get on proper home internet, if you manage the tunnels right, and you create VPNs or semi-direct connections to what you're doing, is not that much. The trick to getting around latency is to not have any. And the way you do that is that all of your music recording and processing is happening in a box that's sitting next to the artist. It's just as if you were at Griffin's house and recording in his house. There is no latency. The only latency that happens is going to be for the operator, if they're over distance, to be able to bring that latency down to a point where it's not really relevant. There's a certain amount of latency in a performance of an orchestra in a venue. They don't hear each other directly. There's a timing and an art to the dance of engineering, and for us, we can see the latency. If we jiggle the fader up and down, you can see that it's happening. But the fact is, music is a fluid thing. We're not trying to punch on a drum beat. We're mixing a band, and as you do that in a fluid and normal way, if the latency is 200 or 300 milliseconds, it doesn't really matter. So the answer is really don't have any latency as far as the thing that you're creating. And if you need to experience a little bit on your end to create that project, then just get used to it, figure it out, figure out what your motions are. But it's so fast that it doesn't really matter if you do it right. If you're trying to move multi-track audio across the internet, it's gonna be difficult to make 48 tracks all land at the same time. But if you just design your recording systems just the way you always did and operate them over a distance, then the latency is not really important, because what you're delivering is exactly on time.
Great answer. More tech questions, Rick? You said there's a technical audience, so we're coming close to the time we assigned for this.
Well, this may be a question for you, Peter, but it's another tech question is: are USB microphones and home studio equipment sufficient, or will serious new live casters want to move to higher end equipment?
Wow, the question for me.
Well, I would, I'll chime in, and I would say plenty sufficient. I mean, Griffin referenced the UA pieces, and you're talking about the high level A to D conversion. I think that the same goes for all of the Shure USB microphones. It's just almost all of our stuff almost all of it's getting to digital at some point anyway, just a matter of where. And I think the home recording equipment and the USB microphones provide that
I think the answer I'd give is we never made anything in our USB line for people to do anything other than make music and record it and produce with it. We didn't have a line of, of quality as to what you should or shouldn't buy. I mean, budget doesn't dictate whether you can actually commercialize your content or not. So we have that in mind with everything we make. So it's all good for the purpose. You don't have to spend thousands to take great talent and do something with it. You can definitely do it with a modest budget, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and a suggestion from behind the scenes is that probably one of the best things that you can do is just upgrade your internet, the best possible internet that you can get, and treat your room to the best of your ability, whether that's mattresses and pillows and blankets to a more reverberant treatment. That's key. I mean, whatever goes in is what comes out in many cases.
That's the polite expression, Rick. Thanks for that. So we are coming close to around 7:30. I wanted to just kind of I had a question to come back to somebody on. Yeah, really just about technology. We're definitely seeing all of these things changing, whether it's the gaming thing we've mentioned, the increase in streaming services, subscription services, monetized content, different platforms. It sounds to me just like there's a huge amount of opportunity to say monetize content or just find ways to commercialize what we do in different ways. If we can't get in front of 50,000 people, how do you commercialize the same event with a 5,000 audience or less? And it seems like there's lots of opportunities for that. And I'm just curious just to kind of get, as we close out on this, is there a consensus that really once we can get out and perform in front of audiences again, that there's actually, this is potentially a net positive? Once we ramp up, we're actually ramping up to something that was potentially better than what was in the past. Is that a common, an equal view? Do we believe that was a real concern or trepidation for what's to come?
I think when things really open up, I for one think it's going to be the second Roaring 20s. I think I definitely am wanting to go out and see people and definitely music in a safe way. I'm sure we all are. And I think it's going to come back in a really strong way.
Yeah,
but
people
anyone's
are ready
guess.
to roar. Yeah. Sorry, I stepped on you.
Sorry.
Yeah, you can sense it. We're doing a handful of little club gigs around here in Nashville with a guy named Pat McLaughlin and just a little band. But man, people are just, they get wind of this gig and what tickets are available are gone just in a split second. Mm-hmm. And it's just what Adam said, nothing can take the place of an artist on a stage and the fan base, the energy in that room. There's nothing that can take that place. Just like you guys said, Griffin and Taylor, you have your fans may not even own all your records, but by God, they're at every show, and that's what you kind of got to bank on. You're the ones that have developed that relationship. You know what I mean? That's what y'all have cultivated. Mm-hmm. And, to add the hybrid element to that, it can work. It's got to be cost benefit. I don't think $1 is a realistic thing. I think you got to have some skin in the game, you know what I mean? And make it fair to you guys. You got to make it fair to both sides to make it work. But yeah, I agree with Griffin. People are just ready. People are ready.
Yeah,
seems like it's certainly what we see. Adam, carry on.
Oh no, yeah, I was just, I think the demand is going to be through the roof, and as hard as it is to sit here in December of 2020 and think about what it's going to look like in the future, I thoroughly believe that the music business is going to come back better than ever, because everybody's going to want to go back out. Everybody's going to want to get back to what they had and loved. But I think it's also going to open up some opportunities for innovation and other ways to consume music that will just be additional add-ons, not just for the fan and in experiences, but additional revenue add-ons for artists and the people in the industry as well. Because it might open up, like John was saying, sure, there's going to still be the traditional, touring business that employs thousands and thousands and thousands of people and many hundreds of people on some tours. But then also you're going to have a lot of people that are going to get into the broadcasting side, engineering and other sides of it. That's just going to, I feel strongly that it's going to just get more music out to more people, because though there are a ton of dedicated music fans in the world, there's also a lot of people that just are sort of like meh on music. Like they might go see a show once a year and they're just, you know, your average person. I think now that some more the barriers to entry or just the accessibility of seeing live music or catching something from the comfort of your home, that might be the impetus to be like, man, I should really go to more of these shows more often. So maybe that's just me being overly positive about or optimistic about the whole thing. But I feel like once we get back to it, it's going to be better than it's ever been.
Yeah,
I think so too.
One, just on that point, because I think that's a really important point, Adam. We talk about it not diluting what you've got, but it wasn't long ago that TV wasn't a thing and comedians didn't want to be filmed doing their shtick because they thought if you watch it once on TV, then you won't go and see them live in concert, right? That wasn't very long ago. Now you realize that, oh yeah, you do the shtick on TV, you do the same shtick night after night, but the TV's promoted you. So that's not long ago, guys. We're just at that point again now. So take every opportunity to boost what you've got. And, you know, I think we've all got to not be afraid. Just give it a go.
I think so too. And also I'm sorry. The keep in mind too that people have it where we used to TV was a box that had a speaker in the bottom of it, where now we all have really amazing ability in our homes to experience multi-channel Atmos high-end experience in our own homes. And that is, I went to see the Rolling Stones last year. If you are up in the front where I was, it's great. But if you're not, you're back even at front of house. You're watching Mick and Keith on a 70-foot screen. You can't see them. Yes, you are there and you're experiencing the show, and you're there with all your your fellow fans. And there's nothing like a Rolling Stone show or a Muse show or whatever. But if you could deliver a really inspired multi-channel multimedia experience in your home, I think there's more and more of that growth happening, and our ability to deliver that enhances the performance, not detracts from being there. If you're at a Dawes show and you're in the 10th row, then that's very hard to bring home. But there's lots of things that are.
Julie, you had something to add, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually found that when people have done a good live stream, a decent production level live stream, not plinky plonky, is that the tours that we do have on sale have had an uplift in tickets, a substantial uplift as well. Yeah. So, I mean, there is something to be said for that maybe some people will take a risk if they've seen something that's a little bit different, you know. And I mean, I've got everything crossed for that, because I do honestly believe that the industry needs that element of humanity back in it, because everybody's had a blue screen and a blue face now for about 9 months, and it's just bizarre. I've got screen tan. It's ridiculous. I'm like the palest person ever, and I've got like sort of this like red glow. It's ridiculous. But I want to be able to be at some of those first shows. I mean, in London, a lot of places like breweries have started doing outside shows because they've got big gardens, like huge beer gardens. And I mean, that's kind of the dream combination of brewery and live music. You know, it's also a dangerous combination with COVID. But I mean, I'm looking forward to more shows like that. But I mean, we're quite happily asking our artists to do more live streams. I mean, we've got a big show that was supposed to be scheduled for now, a big tour. It's like a 6-week tour, UK and Europe, and it's had to move to this time next year. And we've got the artists doing something in March next year that will hopefully give us a big uplift on the tickets as well. The tickets are doing okay. But we did it for another artist, and the tickets just did that. So it's almost like a try before you buy scenario. Remember when you used to be able to get the headphones and you used to be able to walk into a record store? It's almost like that, but visual.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things that have changed in the last year. I may just finish this off with some stats. I found some information recently about what kind of happened through the pandemic. And in the early stage, there was a 40% increase in people subscribing to streaming services like Netflix and similar platforms. A 50% increase pretty much globally in internet traffic, which is understandable with home conferencing, amongst other things. Big increases in subscribing to music services, whether that's Spotify or others. But it's that unique content. I mean, platforms launched like Disney Plus, obviously Amazon Prime is out there, Apple Plus launched their services. And of course, traditional broadcasters are hunting for more content as well. And I think that desire for content to differentiate what people have the chance to view, now that you can watch anything, anywhere, any device, anytime you like, you know, that demand is going there. So I think not just the people on this call and industry that we connect to, but actually the wider industry of entertainment has something, we have something of interest to them as well, I believe, as we come back to live performance. And the platform to share that, I think, is actually much wider than maybe we're looking at. But I think there is a ton of opportunity. And I think if there's no more specific comments, it would be a great point maybe to close this off. If anyone has any closing comments to make, I think this has been really insightful, and I'm tremendously grateful for all of your contributions to this, which has been, I think, really, really positive and uplifting, actually.
Thanks.
So thank you all, and I look forward to getting into that sweaty club with Glenn and one of his bands in the not too distant future, or seeing the Perfect Band Doors somewhere soon as well.
Good to meet all you guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice to talk to y'all.
Thank you guys.
Good to meet everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, absolutely.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Bye.